Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Dan Rodney and I'm an instructor and course developer at Noble Desktop in New York City. Today's live stream, we're going to be discussing designing responsive email. Before we jump into that content, just a few things about Noble Desktop. We have been around in New York City for 27 years, teaching design and code, all sorts of kind of creative and technical training. So if you want to learn how to create websites or emails, how to code them. We teach that type of stuff. So we teach HTML, CSS, JavaScript for web pages or for email. And we also teach a lot of Adobe software. We teach how to do iOS programming, video editing, all sorts of kind of design and code related technologies. We teach classes here in New York City, which is where I'm located right now. That's where this live stream is originating. And you can attend classes live in person in New York City, but most of our classes are also available to be live streamed as well. So you can basically screen share into the instructor computer and attend live in person, so that there's going to be some people in the classroom, and then you can attend virtually. So if you can't make it to New York City, most of our classes are available to be live streamed. So you can still join in. And in addition to classes, we also have some great workbooks, which I mentioned over here on the screen next to me. And those workbooks are step-by-step exercise, kind of project-based things that are great for learning new skills. Instead of just reading tons of reference about something, we walk you through the process of doing things. So you're learning by doing. And that's how we teach our classes. And these workbooks are included with the classes that you take, but we also sell them separately as well. So if you want to learn how to code HTML email and responsive HTML emails, we have some great classes or workbooks. And the books are available in print or ebook. So if you want to get started right away, you can even just download the ebook and get started right after this live stream. All right, so as far as my background, I am a designer and a developer. I can both design websites, emails, etc., and I can code them as well. So I see things from both sides. Today is going to be more kind of design driven because we're talking about designing responsive email. So it's going to be a little bit different than some of our usual seminars where we're very hands-on, showing you how to do the stuff. We're not going to be actually coding up emails today. We're more talking about what goes into designing and building them. I'll certainly talk about some of the things you want to think about when coding those responsive emails, and kind of give you the general ideas, and then point you to resources for learning how to actually code them and learning the specific code. So a lot of today is going to be me talking through some slides, and the URL for those slides are in the chat. If you're watching this live, I just posted that again in the chat, but it's also in the video description below this video. So all the information that I'm going to be going over in the slides, you can access using that URL. If you're watching this video, you don't have to go through the slides at the same time. You can just sit back and relax, but that reference URL is always going to be there so that you can refer to it in the future. All right, so I'm going to switch over and do a screen share so that you can see this. All right. This is the URL that's in the video description or in the chat if you're watching this live. And to navigate here, you can just use your arrow keys to switch back and forth. Or if you're on a touch device, you can swipe through this as well. All right, so I'm just going to hit my arrow key to go to the next one. So the first topic is kind of an overview thing of things we want to think about when we're designing emails. Do's and don'ts in email design. These are kind of the big picture. Keep these in mind for today's discussion. So when you're designing your emails, focus on your message. You want to know what it is that you're trying to accomplish with that email. And once you have focused on that message, you kind of know what the purpose is so that you can try to be precise. And be concise or precise, both of them are good words, to basically be as short as possible. And what's the least amount of words and the least amount of graphics that you can use to convey that as quick as possible? People's attention spans are very quick, very short. We don't spend a lot of time reading emails, and if it doesn't capture our attention quickly, or if it's too long-winded, people just go back to their inbox and go on to the next email. So you don't want to beat around the bush for too long with that. Creating a hierarchy within an email helps you to convey that information more succinctly and clearly. breaking it up into kind of logical sections lets people understand at a quick glance what things you're covering. So even if they just scan the email looking for like the headings, for example, they're going to be able to just get an idea of what you're talking about, even if they don't read the rest of it in depth. And that kind of leads you into the organizing for quick reading. So if you're creating this kind of hierarchy and organizing it into sections, it's scannable. People can jump over things that they might not be interested in. And even if they do just scan it and kind of pick out the headings, at least they got an idea of what it is that you were saying. Keep it legible. This is really important with responsive emails. Instead of taking a desktop email and just shrinking it down and just saying, well, they can zoom in and, if they want to. Yes, people can zoom in, but if it's not large, easy to read type on their phone, they're not going to do the work maybe to zoom in and out unless they really are interested in your topic. So if it's nice and big and easy to read, you're going to get a lot more interaction with your emails. Make obvious calls to actions. You want to make it clear that if you know what your purpose is and you want people to do a certain something, go out and read an article, buy a product, sign up for a service, whatever it is, update their credit card information if it's out of date, whatever this thing is that you want people to do, make a clear call to action so that they know, okay, if I click on this, I'm going to go do something. And don't be afraid to link out to additional information. You don't have to put all your information in an email. Remember that emails are different than web pages. We might be using similar technology. We're using HTML and CSS to create them, but they are not a website. They can be a different form of communication than a website, where a website can be viewed by anybody. An email is sent to a particular person. You might know more stuff about that particular person. You might know where they live. You might know their interests. And so sometimes emails can be tailored very specifically to that person. You don't need everything about your website in the email. Try to think about what it is you want them to do, and if you want to tell them more information, kind of pique their curiosity in the email, and then if there's more stuff you want, maybe send them to the website, and then there you can give them more information. You don't have to give everything in the email itself. So if you want to read more about things that you can think about in creating emails, MailChimp has a great email design guide that you should definitely reference. There's lots of great information there. And this whole presentation is going to have lots of links for further reading. I tried to pull together a lot of resources. I can't even talk about everything that we cover in terms of all these links, but there's lots of good information in these links that you can read further. So there is an ideal balance between text and images. And the main thing that you want to make sure is that you don't just include a single large image. The biggest reason for this is because it's going to increase your spam score. Fortunately, those annoying spammers that send us stuff, they like to know if you're a real person or not, because believe it or not, they don't actually know you, and they're not sending you specifically an email. They are just sending out probably a mass email to most people, just hoping that they're going to actually hit a real email address. They don't even actually necessarily even know that it's a real email address they're sending it to. They're just sending it to like everything@gmail.com or everything@yahoo.com and just hoping they're going to get some real people. And one of the ways that they would track that is they would put in a single image for tracking purposes to see if a person opened up that email and automatically loaded images or manually loaded images. So it used to be that automatic loading of images was kind of a great thing. And then spammers said, well, hey, if images are being automatically loaded, then we can track that because that's going to come back and hit our server, and we're going to know that that person opened up that email. So that's why a lot of email clients nowadays don't automatically load images, because we don't want to automatically tell a spammer that we opened up that email. So if you only have one image, that's often thought of as like a tracking pixel or a tracking image, and that will increase your spam score. It doesn't automatically get your message blocked, but every single thing that you do that increases your spam score, at some point when you hit the threshold for that email address, if your spam score is too high, let's say your spam score is between 0 and 10, people can adjust their spam blockers to be anywhere from 0 to 10. So let's say 5 is like a middle of the road thing. If they're getting too much spam, maybe they adjust their number. If they were on 5, maybe they go down to 4. and or they go up to 6, depending on whether it was blocking too much email or not blocking enough email. And depending on how many things you do that trigger spam warnings, eventually your email just might completely get blocked and not delivered to that person's inbox. Also, just including one big image is hard to make it responsive, because to design one image that looks great across all devices is hard. If you make it look good on a desktop, the text is going to become small on a mobile device. Or if you make it look great on a mobile device, sometimes when you enlarge that up to a desktop, things are just way too big. So it's not ideal for being able to make it look good across different devices. Also, if images don't load, then readers don't see anything, because if you just have one big image or text and one big image, then they might see alternate text, but they're missing out on a lot of your content. So really the best combination is to use text as much as you can, and then when you need images, use multiple images. Don't just use text and a single image, or just a single image. The worst thing you could do is just one single image with no other text. Use text and multiple images. That's the ideal balance. So speaking about when images don't load, if the email clients don't automatically load images, how do you deal with that? Sometimes they might not ever load those images, but that doesn't mean that all is lost. You can still put alternate text on all of your important images. Not necessarily every graphic needs alt text. Like if you just had an icon for something, that doesn't necessarily need alternate text in terms of something that they need to see. If it's just kind of a decorative element, like a flourish or something like that, you don't necessarily have to put alt text on that. But anything that has content in it that you want people to know, like if it says, save 20% off, and that's trapped in an image, put that as alternate text when you're coding up the email. And so even if the image doesn't load, users will see that alternate text. But make sure you keep that text short. Some email clients won't break and kind of wrap the text onto multiple lines. Some of them will only show up to one line of text. And then actually, if it can't fit on one line, they just don't even show it at all. Other email clients might wrap the text so you can put in more, but if you want to play it safe, again, people's attention spans are short anyway, so try to keep your alt text short, sweet, and to the point. And you can style that alternate text. You actually style the image tag itself when you're coding, and so you can make it bigger, you can change the color, and you can actually make it look a little bit better than just tiny little alternate text that maybe people can't read as much. And if you want to read more about how many people are blocking images and talking more about image blocking, there's some links out here. But let's take a look at an example email. So this, for example, I tried to choose a wide variety of different emails here, and from all different types of businesses. And here's one from Pizza Hut. So if you don't know Pizza Hut, it's famous in America. I don't know about the rest of the world, but Pizza Hut is, they often send out these emails of like, here's a special deal. So like $6.99 for any, and they don't even really have to say pizza because it's Pizza Hut. It's for pizza. They do have other stuff like pasta and wings and stuff, but it's from Pizza Hut, so you just kind of assume $6.99 for any. They probably could have said medium or large or something like that, but basically like, hey, I can get a pizza for $7 and I can order it now. I can go to their website, and using their alternate text, I totally understand what this email is about, even if I don't see any pictures. And, so I get the point of this email. Now, this is what the email actually looked like. Oh, so it's 2 medium pizzas for $6.99 each. Okay, and then they give me some more information. But at least I got the idea back here with this alternate text that if I wanted to load those images, I could. And even if I didn't, I could at least still click on order now and go to the website. And then I would get more details when I do go to the website. Most of these screenshots that I put into this presentation, I do kind of a desktop or tablet view on the left, and I put a mobile view on the right. Some of these have web versions of it that you can view, and then you can click on these screenshots to go out to the web version of it. Not all of them have that. Like in this case, there wasn't like a web version of this that I could necessarily link to, so I just put the screenshots in here. Some of them I found on websites, and they still have those web pages up, so I could link to those, and I just embedded screenshots so we can take a look at them here. Now, if we scroll down, that was the top of the email. If we scroll down, we see the other things. So they were putting in graphics for these, and they also had the alternate text. Notice how things rewrap when they're on a mobile device. So it still works well when you're on a small mobile device. You still get an idea. The text is quite large, so you can still read it nicely on a mobile device, and things kind of wrap and still fit nicely on a mobile device, and they work fine on a desktop. So it's optimized for no images, and if you load the images, it still works. So all around, it's a functional email no matter how you view this email. That's good. Now, when you're designing, depending on your content, of course, but designing on a grid will help you to make your layouts responsive. We're still building our emails with tables, and it's kind of amazing that we're still having to use tables, but because of different email clients not having very good renders, we're still very old school in a lot of the things that we do. It's kind of coding HTML emails is a weird mixture of old school and new school coming together. It's kind of a weird hybrid. So if you're used to creating web pages, emails have different kind of capabilities, because we're not always in a typical web browser, and even if we are, we're in somebody else's web page, and they can change the code. So tables still work best, and because tables are made of rows and columns, the easiest way is to work on a grid, and also making it responsive. If you have two columns next to each other, maybe on a mobile device, they can stack and become two rows instead. So certainly a grid-based design such as this, where we have some rows and columns, is easy to stack when you're on a mobile device. Now, for example, this one, if you notice there's a hand here, that one I can actually click out and view the actual email here. And I think this is a nice, simple, clean look. They feature one main article, just give you a little bit of information about it. And again, then here's some other ones that are kind of secondary things that they want you to look at. They really want you to focus on this one first and then check out these other ones. I like it because it's got space. It's easy for me to just skim it real quick if I just want to read the titles or look at the graphics. If I want to read just a little bit more, they kind of pique my curiosity. But any of these things, I could just click on these to go out and read that article. So that works quite nice. And if I resize my browser window so I can see what it looks like on smaller screens, we see that it stacks on a smaller screen. So that works quite well. Now, some of you might say, well, I see all these emails that kind of break the grid, and I used to see more of these. I don't see as many of them now because people are finally getting more into doing responsive emails. But if you've seen them, a lot of these kind of totally breaking the grid things are mainly made of a single image, or they slice it up into different parts so that they can include multiple images. And if it's a single image, that's going to make it more likely to be marked as spam. But when they're very tightly designed, like highly image-based, they're really hard to make responsive in a good way. So for example, this email here, it really looks almost like a print piece that was sent via email. All of this was imagery, and it was like a top 10. It actually went further down. So this is like a top 10 list of things. So 1, 2, 3, and this is the one. But it's interesting because here's the graphic, here's the text, and when I look at this, I really noticed the 1, 2, 3 almost even more than the elements themselves that I was actually supposed to be looking at. I just kept being drawn to the numbers versus the things that they were actually trying to highlight. But this kind of design would be really hard to make mobile optimized. They could have ditched the huge numbers coming down the middle here and focused on the products, which is actually what the focus of this was. I feel like the focus is this interesting thing going down the middle of it versus the actual products. It's kind of weird to split the description away from the product and have to kind of bridge the gap so far. But if they focused on the product and the description, and they still could have had a number there, but it wouldn't be the central part of it. They could have made something that would go responsive much more easily than this. So as we go through today, some of the emails will be kind of bad examples of things not to do. Some will be good examples of things that we should do. And I included a lot of different things of kind of good and bad so that you see the variety of that good design is not always obvious. some of these emails are older and some of the newer versions are better and more improved. For example, in this is an older email from this company and their newer ones are better than this one. But I still liked including this because this was kind of an off the grid kind of design. But you see some issues. Even if they did slice this up into multiple pieces, there's really no text to talk of. They really should have had some text in addition to the graphics, really to have some nice balance. Now, with some emails like fashion, it's nice to have some text, but I understand that some types of industries are very, very image driven. And you don't sell somebody by describing a sweater, right? People just want to see those. So if I get an email from a company where I just need to see that product, I'm much more likely to load that image. And especially if it's a retailer that you've already been doing business with, you're much more likely to load the images from them. Every market is different, and some markets are definitely going to be much more image heavy than text heavy, and I get that. So, try to find some things to talk about, maybe like a sale or an offer, and have some text in addition to the images. But I get that some of these emails will still, no matter what, be pretty image heavy. But this just scaled down to a small size, and things like the website that they're going to go to, get cozy in your favorite cardi. Some of these things could have been text, especially the website. There was no reason for the website to be a graphic. This is actually baked into the graphic, so the text shrinks down and becomes illegible on a mobile device. And if we actually click on this, we can see this on the web. And I know they say past issues, but really this is kind of like a list of all of their issues. And if you click on that, so this retailer is still making newer emails than the one that we just looked at. And you can take a look at some of these newer emails just to see, like, well, how has their email design changed in over the years, which is kind of neat. So here we see, first of all, bigger images that are going to reduce down to mobile size and a big Shop Now button. So if you look at this, if you think about this as being more mobile optimized, this is kind of more of a mobile first email where everything is really, it's not necessarily responsive per se in that it's different across devices. This is really just what I would consider like a mobile only email. They really targeted for a mobile user, and it still works on big screens, but it's really, let's take a mobile design and then let's just allow it to get bigger on a desktop. And you do really have to look at your audience to know how many of your people are on mobile devices versus desktops. And you can look at your email service provider stats to see. And if most of your people are mobile, maybe that is one thing that you do, is you mainly target the mobile audience and then allow it to scale up and be okay on a desktop, but maybe you focus more on the mobile audience. So as far as ideal widths, around the 500 to 600 pixel range for a desktop. And I kind of think of emails as kind of having two sizes, like the mobile phone size up to like a desktop size. And a lot of tablets have kind of a similar size to desktops. It depends on the laptop. Depends on the tablet, of course, but it's not as widely varying as a website would be, because in email clients, like especially on the desktop, you typically have like a column for your folders, and then you maybe have an advertising column, and you have maybe your inbox in one column, and so you just have a lot less screen space. You don't have your entire screen for the email like you might a web page. So anything up to about 500 to 600 pixels. Some people like to stretch it to 700, but really ideally 500 to 600 pixels would be the ideal width that you go up to. Obviously it should work on smaller screens, but if you're designing for like a large screen, 500 to 600 pixels for the desktop would be like your ideal large width. And then going down, like a small iPhone is 320 pixels wide. So a lot of times people are designing that their emails flex between like 600 pixels and down, with like your smaller phones being like 320 pixels wide. People often ask about custom typography in their emails, and you can do custom fonts, but they don't work everywhere. So definitely test with fallback fonts. Here's some links out to discussions about it, of which email clients it might work in. And this particular link here is useful if you want to get into the coding of it. But it talks all about web-safe fonts or custom fonts. And Outlook in particular is one that's a little tricky because if you're not careful when you do a custom font, if people don't get the custom font, there can be a font bug where it reverts back to Times Roman instead of your custom fonts. But you might not want Times Roman. You might want something like Arial or some sort of sans serif font. So you just have to be careful when you're coding, and this article talks about those issues. So as long as you're aware that custom fonts will only work sometimes and not work everywhere, and you test your email to make sure it looks good with the custom font or with your fallback fonts, then you can go ahead and you can try them out, but just know that it's not going to be a 100% kind of coverage. Not nearly as good as web pages, where custom fonts in web pages are very, very well supported, not necessarily so well supported in emails. If you really, really need a custom typeface and you need everybody to see it, then you can make it an image. Again, don't make all of your text an image, because we talked about this before. You don't just want everything trapped in images, because if images don't load, people can't read it. You can include alt text, but there's only so much alt text that you can include before you lose the display in certain email clients. So for example, Apple is very specific about fonts. And in this email, the heading had to be their custom font. Previously, Apple was always using Helvetica Neue, and now they're using San Francisco as their current font. And but even in this email, even though they made their heading a custom image for their custom font, the rest of the text here was ordinary regular text, and so that didn't have to be their particular font. So if you really need it to be a typeface, the only safe way to do that is to make it an image, but be very, very careful and make sure that it's really, truly required, that it has to be that specific branded font. Animation. So, we can do all sorts of things in web pages. How much of this stuff works in HTML email? Animated GIFs have been around for so long, and amazingly, they really work in almost all email clients. The biggest issue is in Outlook 2007 and newer, people are only going to see the first frame of your animated GIF. So as long as you plan on the first frame being fine for Outlook 2007 and newer, you'll be fine. They won't get the animation, but at least they'll get the image. If you want to see some examples and stuff, this is a great link. And actually, I want to show you some of the examples in here so you can read all about it. But see this. For me, animation in an email it's an attention grabber. You want to try to catch the reader's eye and pull them into looking at something you want them to look at. And sometimes it's just a wiggle like that. It could be just a little something, but what's going to catch their eye? If you're trying to explain something here, like there's like a little tutorial almost of showing people how something works, it's much better to watch something than to describe something. Here again, they're demonstrating a new app, and they're actually literally showing how that app works. So they don't have to read about it, they could just actually watch it. And then there can be very elaborate animations that really catch your eye. Here's an example of that Outlook 2007 issue where some people are going to see the animation, but if you're in Outlook 2007 or newer, then they just see the first frame. But the first frame is perfectly fine. Right? The other frames are interesting, they catch your eye, but if you don't see them, it's okay too. You wouldn't even know that it's supposed to be animated. All right. So here's an example, a moment email that was sent, and this was announcing this particular event. Every time you come into this frame, this slide, it reanimates. So if you want to watch it again, I'm going to arrow back and then arrow back in. And every time I see that animation. So it's a really cool animation. Like the design of this is really interesting. The only problem with it is if you only see the first frame, that's what you see. So Outlook 2007 sees nothing. And unfortunately, what's in this email, in this animation, is all the details of where it is, when it is, what it is. And so if you don't see that, there's no information. Now, I don't remember exactly what this email was like. I don't remember if it was only that one image, but if it was, then that was a really bad email, because First of all, if they didn't load that image, they got none of the information. But even if they did load it, if they were in Outlook 2007 and they just saw this big pink mass, they'd think the email was broken. So you want to be very careful about designing your animations, and the whole kind of build in, fade in thing. It's a cool idea, but because of the Outlook bug, it makes some major challenges to using that. Here's another kind of alternative where they're trying to draw your attention, and they've got this cool thing going on in the backgrounds. But in Outlook, they still see a cool looking email. They don't see the animation, but they still get all the details, they still get all the information, and that's perfectly fine. So plan accordingly, make your first frame good. If all they saw was the first frame, would it still work? As long as that's okay, then go ahead and make as many animated GIFs as you want. Be careful about file size. They can be really big. If you want to learn more about making animated GIFs, we have a great class of creating animated GIFs. You can even make short little videos into GIFs as well. So we have a class. You can take that in person or live online. It's a 3-hour class, fun little class if you know how to use Photoshop and you just want to learn how to make animated GIFs. And if you can't take the class, you can also check out the workbook, which goes through step-by-step exercises showing you how to create animated GIFs in Photoshop if you want to learn more about that. Okay. Click-throughs, calls to actions. You want to make people do something with this email, most likely. Most likely you're not just sending this out just so they can only read the email and then do nothing. You're probably going to want them to click through to your site, click a button to go buy something, or do something. One layout approach is called an inverted pyramid. And let's take a look at some examples of this. This pyramid that's on there wasn't actually in the email. That was drawn on this article for illustration purposes. But the idea is it kind of hits it up with a headline. You see this graphic, and then a little more detail and a call to action. So it's kind of big picture down to call to action. Doesn't necessarily have to look like a literal pyramid, but it's kind of the flow. Like you look here first, and then you move down, and it's kind of a funnel down to the call to action. So kind of the overall with some details, and then hit them up with a call to action. Same thing, like you look here, a little more info, call to action. So that's what they call the inverted pyramid. This, I think, is an even better explanation of this approach and some other examples. You grab their attention first, you give them some more information to kind of build up anticipation, and then you hit them up with the call to action. The idea being that if you just grab their attention and you hit them up with a call to action right away, they might be like, oh, wait, I'm not quite ready yet. Like, that was a little too fast. Like, get my attention, tell me a little bit more. Okay, now I'm ready. Let me go out. Okay. So, for example, here, it gives you an overview, tells you a little bit more, and a call to action. Tells you what it is. Okay, so there's this app. We just released a new version. Here's something about it. There's a learn more. And I think it's funny that this little button here is a very thin button. It's like a skinny call to action. So I probably would have made that a little bit taller. Maybe that was displaying wrong in this particular screenshot. But the spacing is just a little bit off when it's so wide and that short. But it's kind of nitpicking here. So here again, hit them up with like an overview of what this is about, with then a little bit more information and a call to action. So it doesn't have to look like an actual pyramid, but it's kind of the flow of grab their attention, give them a little bit more, and then hit them up with a call to action. It's kind of a flow that is common across emails to try to get people to do something. Those calls to actions, or CTAs as people say for short, make them stand out, make them clear. People want to have an easy way of finding that call to action. They don't have to be a highlighted button like a lot of those examples, but they should just be something that is clear and stands out from the rest of your design. They should be large enough, not only that people can see them, but that they're easily tappable on a mobile phone. Instead of just saying click here, which I'm like, well, what does click here do? Say buy now, read more, something that is going to tell them what's happening. So sign up, register, those things. Instead of click here to register, just say register now, and tell them what that button is going to do. Uh, for calls to actions, and this is true for any call to action, whether it's on a website or an email, I always go back to something that I remember reading about Apple's human interface guidelines when they're saying about designing apps for the Mac or iOS. And I think it applies to all interfaces. If you were creating a dialogue that said, like, do you want to save the file? Yes or no? Instead of saying yes or no, because if you just look at yes or no, you're like, what does yes do? What does no do? If you were saying that, do you want to save the file? Even if people didn't read that, if your buttons said save and don't save, you 100% know what those buttons do, even if you didn't read the dialogue. And I think that's a good kind of rule of thumb, that if your action button, your call to action, says what it does, like register now, buy now, you know what it does. Click here doesn't tell you really what it does. So there's lots of things that kind of go around emails, and one of it is kind of leading into the email itself of, are people even going to open up the email? And you might think, well, that's not really something I need to worry about. Like, I don't need to worry about the subject line if I'm just the designer. But there's something called pre-header text that, as a designer of HTML email, you want to know about, because it might affect your design, and it certainly can potentially affect open rates. So pre-header is a little bit of text that people will see in their inbox right below the subject line. You don't see it in all email clients, but the idea is that if you open up your inbox and you see a subject line and a little bit of pre-header text, like a little sample text, it's like a little sample of what's in the email, between the subject and that other text, hopefully something in there is going to catch their reader's attention and make them want to open up that email. And so an effective pre-header text can help to increase your open rates. You want to design this email and you want people to see it, so you want to make sure that they open it. And sometimes just a subject line isn't as effective in catching everybody's attention. The pre-header text can sometimes be different and will appeal to more people. So the pre-headers can be visible in the email or hidden, and that's where it's important for email designers to be aware of that. Let's take a look and see how this all looks. Here is an example of an inbox where you see who it's from on the first line. So it's from Garrett. The subject line, 21 social media engagement tactics. That's the subject line. And some email clients would only say who it's from and the subject line. But some email clients also put what they call pre-header text. It's like a sample of what's in the email. And it's normally the very first thing at the top of the email. So what's in that actual email? So I can kind of see, in a way, part of the email without having to open it up. Different email clients show different amounts of pre-header text, if they even show it. So not all of them actually show pre-header text. And if they do show pre-header text, some show more characters, some show fewer. iOS apps show more than in the Apple Mail versus Gmail. Gmail shows less. So how much you're going to get depends. And so this kind of gives you a rough rule of thumb. Like here, like around 35 or 40 characters should be shown. Some show more, but probably like 40 characters or more is going to be shown. So you want to put the most important stuff in the first 40 characters, because beyond that, it might not show. So for example, here's just another example. Here it's from H&M Fashion News. The subject is today only, take 25% off. And then the pre-header text is shop the perfect party outfit. And that's actually displayed in the email itself. And because that's the first text, that is what the pre-header text is. When you're coding the email, if you don't want people to see the pre-header text, you can hide that pre-header text. And so, maybe it's not appropriate to show people that, but you still want to say a different thing. It's kind of like a second subject, if you will. Maybe you want people to see it here, but you don't want it to see it there. You can hide that. And so that's just good to know as a designer, that when you're designing real text, whatever the first text is, and it doesn't have to be the thing at the top. If that first thing at the top is an image, wherever the first live text is, that first live text is going to be the pre-header text. So if you don't make something special as pre-header text, keep in mind that whatever the first live text is, that's going to be your pre-header. And so kind of plan some good pre-header text. And if you don't want it visible in the email, you can always hide it so it's still visible in the inbox, but not visible in the email. when we first were talking about the things to keep in mind for today, of kind of the bullet points of like the big issues, purpose, understanding what the email is about is really important to help you design an effective, good email. Because if you don't know what this email is about, like what the main focus is, it's kind of hard to design people to do a certain task if you don't really know what that task is, if it's not clear and defined. So there are kind of some main categories of emails. There's e-commerce emails where you want somebody to buy something. There's event ones, and this could be anything related about the event, but like join an event, go to this event. Informative things like newsletters where you just want people to read information and you're sending it to them. Or transactional stuff. And the transactional stuff, there's a lot of little transactional emails that you might not even think about, but they need to be designed. And transactional stuff could just be like, thanks for your order. Your credit card has expired. Come please update the credit card expiration date. So these are kind of some different types of emails that we're going to be going over, and I want to go through some examples of each type of email. There are probably more types than this, but these are kind of like the biggest types, I would say. And let's go through some good and bad examples of each of these types of emails. So we'll see examples of these. First, we'll start with the e-commerce. And again, some of these are good, some of them are bad, some of them are a mixture of things, but they're meant to be talking points that we can think about what we like and what we don't like about this. And a lot of these are things that I can click out and see the actual email here, so I can scroll through it. So when you first look at this, it actually, things are nice and large. They're easy to read. I get nice big pictures. If I go down to a mobile screen size, some of the text does start to get a bit smaller, though. That's where thinking from a mobile-first approach, design for the mobile size, make sure things look legible and good there. They might be fine when they enlarge up to desktop. Maybe they get a little bit big, but they still might be manageable. Instead of designing from desktop size first and then hoping it looks good scaled down, maybe start designing the mobile size first and make sure your graphics look good there. You might have done less space around this if you were designing the mobile one first. So that the text could be a little bit larger. Maybe the element within this could have been larger so you could see some more of the detail on a mobile device. Certainly was a simple layout. This is not done in a way that's different between mobile and desktop. Sometimes that's okay, as long as it works across all layouts. In this book here, in this button here, enjoy 10% off your next order. This particular typeface has very, very small, thin pieces. It's even on a high-res screen like this, and this is actually, it's a low-res graphic, unfortunately, but it's very, very thin things, and these are breaking up. They just aren't very legible. By the time I get down to a smaller screen size, it gets even less legible for some of this stuff. So be very careful about the particular typeface you choose, especially if you're putting it in an image, because as you scale it up and down, especially as you scale it down, it can break up. And that's where designing for mobile first will certainly help. But something like this, this button, it really wouldn't have needed to be this custom typeface. This could have been text, and it still would have been fine. So calls to actions like this, if they don't really need to be a custom special branded graphic, just make them text. And that way people can see it even if they don't load images. It's a call to action. If they just, even if they didn't see the rest of this stuff and they just saw enjoy 10% off the next order, that would be something that maybe they'd actually do as a call to action. At least the code here is something that I can select and I can copy and paste. I've sometimes gotten emails where the code is embedded in a graphic, and there's nothing more annoying than having to remember what a code is and then making a typo and having to come back. It's a royal pain in the butt. So always make those kind of things actual text. I should not have to say that, but I've gotten emails where it's embedded in a graphic, so I have to say that. Here's another one. I really like the look and feel of this particular email because it's not your typical email. It's very clean, very nice design, lots of nice white space. Kind of has like a traditional-ish feel, but yet still feels very modern. So they kind of kept that. We're current, but classic. And so the shoes are nice and big on a mobile device. And when we're on a larger screen, they're next to each other, but on small screens, they're stacking on top of each other. So it's just high quality images, clean, easy layout. Their choice of justifying the text, I would say, is not a great choice there because you can get some really ugly gaps, especially as you get down to smaller screens. But aside from that, the design of this is really quite nice. And if you look at some of their other issues here as well, they just do some really neat stuff here. And again, with fashion is very important that you see imagery in fashion. So they do a nice combination, though, of having graphics and text. It's a nice balance. Let's take a look at this one here. This is an older email. Let's see as we scroll through. Very simple layout. There's really no clear call to action, though, when you're done with this. You can click on any of this to actually go shopping, but just in case that wasn't obvious, that you could click on this to go there, it would have been nice to have like an actual call to action, like shop now or something with you. This carry it with you thing, like some call to action other than going and doing this on the social network. Something down here, just in case you didn't click on this, what do you want people to do? So remember to actually generally have a call to action that is clear that you want people to do. With this particular email, let's take a look at this one. This is an email that I've seen a lot, this kind of email, in the sense that it kind of looks like a little mini website. You've got navigation up here at the top, and I'm seeing it less and less nowadays as people are going over to responsive email design. And this is an older email, but I like to point this out that emails are not websites. We don't need lots of navigation. Remember, what is the point of the email? It's not to have them go check out everything on your website. You've probably done business with them, maybe even know what they're interested in. In this case, they were trying to push this particular product and raise awareness, trying to sell this particular product. There's text that's trapped in here, and there's also not even really a clear call to action. So really, the way they could have made this better is to have gotten rid of this navigation, focused on the product, had some live text just in case they don't load images. They could have had some live text and a clear call to action of, shop now, buy now, something like that, where what is it that you want people to do? Are you just assuming they're going to click on something somewhere to go to the website? Maybe they would, maybe not. Everybody is quite as savvy about that. Okay, so some of their newer emails. Let's take a look at some of these. They're different. So they've kind of moved past that other email was from years ago. So now they're not doing as much of that kind of design here. So you can see they're not having that big navigation thing at the top because that just doesn't go responsive properly. What are you going to do with all of those different email links that are at the top there? So good for them. They've moved on to better designs since this, but I still see emails that do this type of stuff even today, not as much as it was years ago. Shake Shack, if you don't know Shake Shack, they have they're like a burger and milkshake place. And in this particular email, I want to show this example more so just to kind of call out the busyness of this graphic. That the rest of the email itself actually, they've got a heading with a little bit of text and a graphic that could reduce down to a smaller screen size. This photo would still be legible at a small size, but this one would not. So be careful when you're designing your graphics that are going to be put into a newsletter. And I think this is maybe, I don't know because I don't know the history of this design, but this could be the classic case of designing a graphic to be put into a newsletter, but maybe not designing it in the context of the newsletter. Like, why is Shake Shack repeated twice? I could just imagine that maybe the designer was building this graphic just as an individual file, knowing how big it was supposed to be in terms of the template. So maybe this is like a template that Shake Shack is always there, and there's this standard place to put your graphic, and so they design this with Shake Shack there, kind of forgetting that it's actually going to be put into an email. And so I guess the lesson there is, if you're doing like a templated email where you're always designing graphics for the template, maybe your design should be done like with a screenshot of the template, and you design your graphic in that context. So you always remember what it looks like in the email itself. And designing mobile first for your graphics, design for the small screen to make sure that everything's legible there, because even on a desktop, some of this type is really small to read. And maybe they're thinking, oh, you don't really need to, but still, then if you didn't really want people to read that, did that even need to be there? Make sure it's going to look good on small screens all the way through big screens when you're designing your graphics, especially if you're including a lot of text in your graphics. This particular email is another classic example of like an email that's a website. And we shouldn't be trying to build like a website, like a little mini website, into an email. We just don't need all that navigation. What's the point of this email? To get them to go shop this particular sale, right? Now, what's interesting is they have pre-header text here, free shipping and free returns. Then they have a graphic, free shipping and free returns. Then they have this graphic, free 2-day shipping. And so they really want you to know that they have free shipping and free returns. But all of these are kind of smaller. And so actually, if they just would have had one free shipping, like this one's a little bit bigger size here, but they wouldn't have needed you don't need to say it 3 times. Say it once. That's okay. And this here, they were doing a custom typeface here, but they didn't even do stuff like custom kerning in here. This is kind of badly kerned. So they didn't really even take advantage of all that a custom typeface and a custom graphic could be, because this was a graphic that was just saved and popped into the email. This could have been built with live text. This didn't have to be this particular custom typeface. This could have been built with plain text that wouldn't have required images to be loaded. And so they could have gotten the idea of this particular sale without loading images. The logo is, of course, going to be a custom image, but things like the shipping and this, they could have built this layout as code instead of doing it as a graphic. And it would have loaded really quickly, and everybody would have seen it even if they didn't load images. So don't build graphics for things that can be coded, ideally. I mean, I understand that in a fast-paced turnaround, sometimes designers have to create a graphic because they can't do the coding for the emails. But in an ideal world, try to avoid that whenever possible. In screenshots like this, because the mobile device was really tall and this presentation doesn't let me scroll up and down through tall graphics, I'd have to sometimes split screenshots so that you could see the top on the left and the bottom on the right. So this was an example of a mobile email that was pretty well optimized. There's some parts of it like this that really weren't very well optimized, and some parts like this. But some of those things aren't really so important. Like, for example, here, like the in-stores and online. It's like, actually, if you're saying in-store and online, that's pretty much just a sale everywhere. So don't even know why they bothered saying in-stores and online. It's everything. So here they were doing custom graphics, introducing the Woodsman cardigan, and but it's a fashion thing. So people are probably going to load the graphics because, again, I don't really care about a cardigan if I can't see it. I want to see that. You're not going to sell it to me based on a description. Their calls to actions down here look like they were just graphics. So and some of this text was kind of very thin. It's again that same typeface that's very thin. Be very careful about legibility with your calls to actions. If you don't need to go with a custom typeface for some of those calls to actions, just go with regular text. I can see within the first part of it branding the J. Crew with a particular typeface, but not everything needs to be that typeface. Down here in this navigation, they just used regular text. They could have extended that up to the calls to actions so that images don't need to be loaded for those calls to actions. Here's another kind of similar email. in terms of the design. Another fashion email, again, the top, the middle, and the bottom. And in this particular case, like the shop them all, I like this example just to show that not everything has to look like a physical button. I still think this is a clear call to action here. You're like, oh, the boots, shop them all. I can click on that to go shopping for them, but it doesn't have to look like a physical button. It's still a call to action. Okay, and then here they have other ones, and I like how they did some kind of categorization of different types of links. Like these are a little bit more important, these are a little less important, but they're still there, and they kind of segmented the different types of things. So I just wanted to show kind of this as an alternative, but works kind of well for a mobile size. This is kind of hard to read though. Be careful of contrast issues on images, especially if you think about where people are going to be reading emails. We're not always reading emails in perfect lighting. We might be out in the sun, and the sun blares out our screens, and we can't always see things very well. So sometimes if you don't have enough contrast, things are really hard to read, and that's just something to kind of think about. This one from Best Buy, this is the top, this is the bottom, and like this text especially, this is so clear, like really large, mobile designed typography. This was a custom graphic, but the way that this was all locked up, and like, this would have been hard to code from scratch in this particular layout without using a graphic. But they did use some text here. This call to action was regular text, this was regular text, and then the rest of these things were graphics. This is like an overall shopping for deals. They didn't try to show everything that's there. They just said, hey, there's some deals going on, and you can either get 5% back or 18 months financing. They had a very clear goal of what they wanted to do, to try to say, hey, there's deals and you can save money or get financing. That was it. They didn't try to do too much. So they had a clear, focused thing that was trying to make it very obvious to people what they wanted to do. So I think it's a pretty nice design there. I think this is a good place to take a 5-minute stretch break, restroom break, because we're about halfway through. And I'm going to put up a timer here. And if you want to go grab a drink, use the restroom, whatever you want to do, when the counter finishes, we will get started with some more stuff. If you're watching the recording of this later on, you could just fast forward a few minutes to skip past this. I'm going to put on some music while we're waiting. Okay, so let's get back to it. The next type of emails are event emails. And some of these examples, so there's this really great website called Really Good Emails, and they've got tons of example emails here. It's a great website. Uh, the newer versions that they're actually including links to the actual code for the email a lot of times as CodePen links. But they didn't go back and do the earlier emails, probably because they just didn't have the code for all of them. So earlier ones, like a lot of the ones that I've done screenshots for in this presentation, they have a screenshot for the desktop and a screenshot for the mobile one. At least in my experience, some of the mobile ones they just looked like a desktop one scaled down when I knew that they were going to be responsive and that they would have been mobile optimized. So if you're looking at the older examples, don't always trust the mobile view in here. If you're looking at the newer emails, check out the CodePen version of it, and there you can see if it's responsive or not. For example, this particular email, I can just tell by looking at it that these were text-based emails that would have very easily been able to be responsive, and I'm sure would have been responsive. I don't think that this just would have scaled down. I could be wrong, but it just makes sense to me that this would have been a responsive email. This is like the inverted pyramid idea. Quick, book your spot. Okay, so right away I know there's a Thursday webinar, but I can see a little bit more details, a little bit more, and then a clear call to action: register your free place. If that's all I see, that there's a webinar on Thursday and it's a free place, I actually like that register your free place is there instead of just register now, because if I just read the headline and the button, I know it's a free webinar. If free was somewhere else, might have had to read to see, does this cost any money or is it free? So I think that's a very effective call to action, because it conveys like, hey, do it now, it's free, just register. So probably would have been well optimized on a mobile device, because this text could have just reflowed and it would have been maybe some more lines, but it still would have worked on a smaller screen. Here, let's take a look at this little bit taller email here on their website. Join us for an event. So right away they tell you when the event is, and you might say, oh, shoot, I'm busy on the 25th, so I can't go to that. But if you're free, like, oh, there's a featured designer. They tell you a little bit about him, and then purchase your tickets. Oh, okay. So kind of the inverted pyramid again, like hit them up with some details, give them some more information, and then the call to action. This one is, it's also kind of a transactional thing, but it's related to an event. This is just a reminder to say, hey, you replied to an event that you're attending. So just as a reminder, people are always forgetting about events. Like, luckily, you didn't forget about today's event. We send reminder emails because a lot of people forget about the event. So let's say, this place knows, hey, people forget about events. Let's remind them. Just say, hey, you replied that you were attending. Just a reminder, this is when it is. And maybe there's some things you want to do, like add it to your calendar, see who else is going. Oh, maybe you're going to be running late, so you could message the host, or maybe your plans have changed, you can update the reply. They know that these are the things that you might do relating to an event, and they remind you of like, oh, well, here's the address. They don't remind you of all the reasons, like what the event was, and give you all that stuff, because while they could have sent you all the details of the event, you already replied you were attending. You probably know what the event is, and they do show you a picture, and they tell you what the name of it is. So they don't have to tell you everything about it. So even though the screenshot for the mobile optimized version doesn't look like it's mobile optimized, again, I think the screenshot was just messed up. This could have very easily been mobile optimized. Maybe these weren't two columns. Maybe they just became one column next to each other. This text would have fit nicely on a mobile device. And so I think this probably would have made a very nice mobile email because of its simplicity and its focus. This email knew what it wanted to do, and it only showed the things that it needed to show at that time. Backstreet Boys, the movie. This email, it didn't try to tell people, oh, here's the movie. The movie's out. Like Backstreet Boy fans probably would have known that the movie was coming out, and they're just reminding you, hey, see it in the theaters. So very simple in terms of what it wanted to do. It's not describing the movie, telling you that, hey, there's a movie out. It's just like, hey, go see the movie. And if this was to a fan club of Backstreet Boy people, like they're probably just going to go see it. In this case, it was very simple in that they knew where, like if this was a fan club and you gave them your address, they could just look up local theaters and send them to you to make it easier for you to just go and book it. The problem here is that the text is actually not so ideal for the call to action, because the title and the name, like the name of the theater and the call to action, like they're all the same. They all look the same. And even though the call to action is in all caps, is click here for a list of showtimes and to purchase tickets, blah, 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 blah. Showtimes and tickets, or, just say purchase tickets. Because of course, when you purchase a ticket, you're going to see showtimes, right? But maybe there's one button for showtimes and another one for purchase tickets or buy tickets. This could have been massively reduced. Even if they just removed click here for a list of showtimes, it could have just said showtimes and purchase tickets. So that, and also on a mobile device, that would have fit a lot better. So there's ways that they could have edited this down. You typically don't need to say things like click here. And if that call to action would have looked a bit different, it would have stood out a bit more. And right now it just kind of blends in. So remember that clear call to action. Could have been a lot worse, but could have also been better as well. Informative newsletter type things. Not everything is about go buy this thing. Maybe it's about read these articles. Here's some news, whatever it is. So in this case, we go back to that same example that I showed earlier. These are just articles that you might want to go out and read about stuff. And I think that's a very effective design. This one is a monthly digest of icons. So this is for designers. And as a designer, we're visual people. We like to see things. So they show some icons to talk about it. You can download it, show some more imagery, talk about it. You can go read the interview or support it. Some more icons. You go view the person, some more something, play color. So they also have a clear call to action down here. It's not necessarily something that like stands out super much, but it is still clear. And I like this example because I wanted you to see different calls to actions. Not every call to action has to look like a big rounded circle button. That's not the only call to action that we have. We do have other ones. As long as it's clear and people will see it and notice it, this is still clear, even though it's more subtle. It doesn't have to jump out at you first. You want the most important thing to jump out at you first, and that's the visuals. And it's still like, oh, okay, I can go check that out. I can go download those things. And again, even though the screenshot does not look like it reduced very well, this text I think would have reduced a bit better than it looks here. It's possible that it wasn't re-optimized kind of for a smaller screen size, but with the text-driven layout like this, where there's just a graphic and then text, it could have been optimized for a mobile device better. The layout works. Now, this is where I know that Tesla emails are responsive because I've gotten them. I've gone on a test drive for Tesla, not because I can afford a Tesla, but you can go on a free test drive. You just go to a Tesla place, take it for a test drive. It's an amazing car. It is I test drove the Model S, and it is the biggest, heaviest, fastest car I've ever driven. It's amazing. It's really cool. It's weird because it's mostly a one-pedal car, because as you push the accelerator, it goes or slows down. If you let go of the accelerator, the car actually slows down and it'll come down to 5 miles an hour. Of course, if you want to stop faster, you can hit the brake, but you kind of just have to hit the brake just to finally stop. It's really cool. It wouldn't take me long to get adjusted to it. But I know that their emails are responsive because I got emails after I went on their test drive. And this is an example of a lot of information. Teslas cost anywhere from like $80,000 to $130,000 for a Model S. I think it's somewhere in that range. And so, people are probably going to want to learn a little bit about, first of all, it's an electric car. It's different. they're putting down some decent money. But I think they did a really good job of breaking it up. In the very beginning, when I talked about things to think about, making clear, concise calls to actions that stand out, making it scannable, creating a hierarchy, breaking things into sections. Like, they kind of break up the text. And even though there's a bunch of text, they have smaller paragraphs. And they're breaking up the email with images, so you see images and text. And if you like to read, you can. If you don't like to read, you can just view the picture and skip the text. So there's kind of a little something for everybody in here, and it doesn't feel overwhelming, even though there's a bunch of pictures and a bunch of text. You could just kind of look at it and read or view whatever it is you want, and it's still quickly, easily scannable. And so it's nice. And it is mobile optimized because the pictures just scale down and the text just reflows. And if these things don't fit onto one line, they can stack onto multiple lines. So it still worked well on mobile devices, even though the screenshot on this didn't show that. This one I just wanted to include, as it really looks like this would be a print newsletter that you would get in the mail, or like you download a PDF of this newsletter. This is not appropriate for an email, because column-based design like this, where like there's a main column that you read through first, and then you go to like a second column. When you look at a design like this, it's hard to even know where to look. Like, do I read this and then read this and then go back? Like, I really didn't know exactly what to look at. Clearly, this is less important because that column is smaller. This type of design worked in print because you could see everything and you didn't have to scroll through a printed page. Your eye could scan down one column and then it could go to the next. That doesn't work in email because you'd have to scroll through one column and then scroll back up and try to read the next. So don't just take what you're used to doing in print and apply it to email design or web page design. Emails and web pages deserve different types of layouts than we did in print, if you're a print person moving over to digital design. Finally, transactional emails. These are just things that need to be done based on something that maybe like an account you have or something, like LinkedIn. They'll send you an email and say, hey, somebody'd like to join your network, accept it, or go view the profile. Like, they could have more options here, like don't accept, but they're like, hey, you're either going to accept it right now, or maybe you want to go and like check them out and be like, who was this? Do I remember this person? Maybe I want to message them. Like, there's lots of things they could have done, but it's really like, hey, either you're going to be ready to accept it, or like you want to go check him out, maybe email him, and all the rest of the stuff you can see on the website. You don't have to put it all in the email. The rest of the stuff can be done on your website. And there's other stuff here, but they really, in this case, they made it harder to read intentionally because they really wanted you to focus on this. This is probably what you're going to do. And there's other stuff there if you want to read it, but you probably don't need to. And here, again, like, have your clear purpose in mind and know kind of when to throw out your calls to actions, and optimize text for mobile. In this case, this was mainly text driven, which was good that most of it was text. It could have been mobile optimized, but it wasn't. This was actually a screenshot that I did, and it wasn't coded properly for mobile devices. It could have been. It was all regular text. It could have been reflowed properly, but it wasn't. Now, they know that the person getting this email has this credit card, but yet they still put this tagline: the card is for the essentials. The cashback is for the fun. It's like, you really need to have that. But basically, the point of this is like, you have the card. You know what the deal is. Do you like it enough to share it with a friend to get $50? Like, yeah, let me invite some friends. And just in case you wanted to know more about how it works, like, oh, so you invite your friends, we'll offer them 150 cash back, and you get 50 up to that. What's really funny here is that they have some Spanish text down here, and I don't read Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. But one time I was given a seminar, and somebody basically said that this Spanish text said something about like that they can't help you even if you do speak Spanish, like you have to go to the website or something. But I was just thinking to myself, if I'm a Spanish-speaking person, which they know that because I go on their website and I pay the credit card bill in English, they should know that I speak English. But even if they didn't, would a Spanish-speaking person read through all of this with the hope that eventually they're going to say, well, I know the Spanish is coming. I mean, that they threw in like one little paragraph of Spanish in here is just kind of silly that they threw it in down there. Because why would I keep scrolling hoping that my language is eventually coming? So it's just kind of a weird thing that they had that even in there. But yeah, so it was a layout that could have been mobile optimized, but it wasn't. And they could have probably also kind of cleaned things up. Like, did they really need to have all these details there? Maybe they could have had some of that stuff on the website. Like, it's a balance of how much do you include in the email and how much do you have on the website. You don't have to put it all in the email. The emails should try to get them to do it. And I know in the banking industry, maybe they had to put some of these things there legally, but just include just enough to get people to do something. I'm not going to talk about this example too much, but this is just an example of, where's the focus, right? Like, there's so many different visual appearances here. It is a funnel to get me to go down here to donate now, but they did things like underline text, and I don't think this was, if I remember right, this was not a link, and that's a huge no-no. Don't ever underline text that's not a link. So it was just like they have this tagline of this thing that's describing their small theater, and then they have this, and then they have this. So it's like, which of these do I look at first? Like, I could just read it down, but they're all kind of different. Like, it's just kind of all over the place in terms of visual design, and it's not quite as focused as it could be in terms of the nice story. They could have weaved this idea into this idea of why you should donate, right? So I think they kind of didn't really think it quite through enough. And you can see they're having some technical issues here. Like, there's just some weird space there. This image doesn't reduce down properly because it's so many images. It's one image is made of 3 images, and so it just scales down. So anyway, lots of things they could have done to improve that particular email. This was literally an inverted pyramid. I kind of like that just to show it. You don't have to do the literal pyramid, but they actually literally drove your eyes down from like get your attention, give you a little more info, and drive your attention down. And then actually in this email, because they drove your attention down to this text, there are some calls to actions here that you could go out to do, but this is an interesting email because they actually didn't want you to do anything in the email itself. They wanted you to just go and update your phone. So like here, upgrading is free. It's easier than ever. They tell you how to go update it, but you don't actually have to click anything in this email. This was just informative. Like, hey, the upgrade is here. Go update. So they didn't have to make super big, like, do this buttons, because they would have been perfectly happy if all you did was read this and you didn't tap anything in it. You just actually went and updated your phone. I really liked the idea of this email in terms of catching people's attention. Like, so this is restaurant.com, and they sell these certificates where you can save money. Like, you get $25 to use at the restaurant, but you only pay like half of that. So in this case, I had a certificate that I hadn't used, and they were just reminding me, saying, hey, don't do the dishes tonight. Like, go out and eat. Just a reminder, like, you've got this certificate that you can use, so you can go use it. And so I like the idea of trying to catch my attention instead of just saying like, hey, you have an unused certificate. They're like, hey, tonight you don't have to do the dishes. Like, you can go use this certificate if you forgot about it. These kind of reminder emails sometimes are necessary because sometimes people forget that they have something that they can watch or that they can use. The only thing about that is, like, I had to get down here to know what it is that I still had. Like, don't do the dishes. Like, you've got this this certificate. And then like, oh, then they could have said like, okay, this is how to use it. So in terms of like order, is like, here's the kind of the pitch. Oh, you have the certificate. Then here's how to use it. Instead of like, here's how to use a thing that we're going to tell you about. All right. So I think the order could have been improved a little bit, but I really liked the idea of what they were kind of trying to do with it. Layout and the order could have been a little bit better though. So those are just some examples. These websites, like I mentioned, the reallygoodemails.com, they have tons more examples. MailChimp has a whole inspirational website, and this website is lots of organized different types of emails. So if you want to look at onboarding emails and subscriber emails and promotional emails, transactional ones, behavioral, like they just break it down into different types of emails. So if you're interested in a particular type of email, there's lots more examples. I just wanted to bring up some examples. Now, coding, we're not actually going to do some coding, but I do want to talk about some coding issues to think about for those of you who might know something about coding. If you don't know about coding, these are just things that you'll want to consider if you are going to get into coding, or if you're going to work with a coder, just things to be aware of. There are no standards for coding HTML email. I wish there were. Lots of people wish there were. There are coding standards for web pages, but there are none for emails. There's no like, this is how we're supposed to code HTML email. It would be great, but there isn't. Part of the issue is that older versions of Outlook for the desktop. So there's Outlook is Outlook.com, but also an Outlook app primarily for Windows, although some people on the Mac also use it. But I'd say probably more people use it on Windows than use it on the Mac. But the desktop Outlook app, it used to use Internet Explorer 6 for the rendering engine. And sometimes I wish I had that back because the new Outlook 2007 and newer, they use Microsoft Word to render emails. Word. Yeah, Microsoft Word. They don't even have a web browser. So they're rendering HTML and CSS. It's actually kind of miraculous that Word can render HTML and CSS at all, as good as it does, but they're not even using a browser. So that creates all sorts of issues. So basically, whatever works at the moment, just do whatever works. Don't ever feel bad like, is this the right way to do something? If something works, then it's fine. There's no ideal standard of like, you should do it this way. You can look at how coding works, but there's no official standard that's like, this is the way you're supposed to do it. This is the way you're not supposed to do it. It's like, if it works, do it. It's fine. Biggest issue is that the email clients themselves, the apps are often updating the websites like gmail.com, yahoo.com. They can update anytime. And so that actually creates a tricky thing for people developing emails, because the email that I sent out yesterday might have worked yesterday when I tested it, but it could break today, and there's nothing I can do to fix it because I already sent it out and it's already in people's inboxes. And if that email client just changed today, I literally can't do anything to test it. And the email that, if I have a template that I send out every week, ideally you'd really, if you were really serious about it, you'd really test it on a weekly basis, because you never know when things are going to change. And an email client could change with no notice, and the code that worked last week might not work this week. So you do always have to keep retesting your emails and making sure that the techniques that you're using are continuing to work. And if you're ever reading anything about code, seriously, things from just a few months ago could potentially be outdated. It all depends on the particular topic. It might not be outdated, but it might be. So anything you read, always consider that you have to test it to make sure, is this still true? Because some things from 2 years ago are still true, but some things from 6 months ago are out of date. Just out of curiosity, let's see some market share stats of what email clients are top. iPhone, huge. Apple iPhone there, 31%. Gmail, 21%. iPad, 11%. Google Android, 8%. Apple Mail, which would be the Mac, Apple Mail. Outlook as an app, Outlook.com. Yahoo Mail is down to 2%. So, so that's pretty interesting. So this is calculated. This Litmus is an email service provider where you can send your emails through. So they calculate it based on over 1 billion opens tracked in February. So this is a page that this website keeps updating. So you can check on this as time goes on. You can kind of see like how it's been changing, whether things have been going up or whether things have been going down, and you can kind of see the trends in email clients. By the same company, Litmus, they often put out a report once a year. So there was a 2015, now there's a 2016. So kind of at the beginning of each year, they recap the previous year and kind of talk about it and see like what the trends are in terms of desktop usage and mobile and webmail and all that stuff. And they give some stats. of the particular email clients, and they typically compare it from one date to the next, so you can kind of see, again, the trends that are going on. So if you want the live stats, the other website's good for live stats, and this is kind of a recap. So if you ever want to share this with particular people that you're working for, if they want to know, like, if they're using Outlook and they're like, it's a huge audience, well, you can point them to this to say, like, worldwide, kind of what the stats might be. But also, in terms of audience, these are general stats from Litmus, but look at your particular email list and go into your email service provider, if it's Litmus or MailChimp or whoever it is, and look at your stats for what your people are opening your emails in. Because if you're mainly business to business, maybe you have a much higher number of people using Outlook than maybe an average consumer. They might be using Gmail a lot more. So one of the biggest things when we're coding responsive websites, and it's interesting, when I gave the seminar the one time and I said responsive, a woman raised her hand and she said, I think what you say responsive and what I say responsive as, like, I think we mean different things. And she thought that responsive meant that people were going to respond to the email. And she's like, I just want them to respond. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, yes, we do actually all want people to respond to our emails, but a responsive email in the sense that we're talking about it is one that responds to different size screens and adapts its display. It responds so that it's going to look good on a small screen, a medium screen, and a big screen. And that's what, when we say a responsive website or a responsive email, that is what we typically mean by responsive, is adjusting to different screen sizes. And hopefully if you design a well-designed responsive email, people will respond to it. Two different meanings. I got a kick out of that. I thought that was pretty good. And honestly, if you're not used to web terminology, I can see where she's coming from. It's a totally different type of responsive meaning. So when we're creating responsive websites that adapt to different size screens, we use these things called media queries. So CSS is the styling language that we use to code how things look, and media queries test for different size screens. So if it's a screen this size or smaller, or this size or bigger, we can make different media queries to target them and say, hey, if I'm on a mobile device, then do this styling, and if I'm on a bigger screen, do this styling. And they're great. That's how we make a responsive website. The biggest problem is that it doesn't work everywhere in email clients. And the big juggernaut of Gmail, which is the biggest webmail client out there, biggest kind of free email service, Gmail sucked for CSS. You have to put media queries into a style tag within your web page. And Gmail used to strip out the style tag entirely. They would just dump it. It didn't matter where the style tag was in your document. They would find the style tag and just toss it. So they just got rid of it. The only way we could do any CSS was to do inline CSS as a style attribute directly on each and every individual element. Like every paragraph, every header, every element had to have a style attribute. And it was really, really tedious. There were inliner tools that we could run that would allow us to write our styles in a style tag, and then the inliner tool would copy and paste it, which we still use today, actually. But the biggest problem was that media queries can't be inlined. They have to be left in a style tag. So the big news was that in the end of 2016, Gmail finally said, we're going to be able to do responsive email design. Huge thing, because the way they were dealing with CSS, you couldn't do it prior to this announcement. So September 14th, they announced that they were going to do this. And then they started to roll out the updates a little bit after that. So that was huge. So Litmus has been tracking the progress on the rollout of this update, because this is a major change for the email industry. But they're not quite done. They last updated this actually that was written on September 30th. I think down at the bottom, they might have an update schedule. They have lots of information in this article. No, they don't have an update thing here. But they keep updating this right here. This is like what's going on right now in terms of how many things have gotten updated. And there's still 3 holdouts, like the old free apps. If you check your email, not your Gmail, but a different email through POP or IMAP in the Gmail Android app, it hasn't been updated. The biggest one, though, is mobile webmail. So if you're on a desktop, you get the update. So it supports the style tag, but mobile webmail. So if somebody opens up your mobile web browser and just checks their Gmail through that mobile app, not through an app, but just through your web browser, that has not been updated. So until basically all these checkboxes go green, not everybody in Gmail is going to get the style tag, and therefore they don't get media queries. So we're close. We're close. So there's a lot of people now with Gmail accounts that are going to get responsive emails, but not everybody does. So until those all go green, we still have to inline our CSS. And it means that for those people that have those red X's next to them, they're not going to get a responsive email. They're still going to get like the desktop one scaled down. But for everybody else, the inlining doesn't get rid of the responsive layouts, because we can still keep the style tag with the media queries, and we can use that to override the inline styles. We still have to inline the styles so that those non-updated accounts get some CSS, because that's the issue. If you don't inline and it strips out the style tag, there is no styling for the email whatsoever. So we have to really be sure that everybody in Gmail is supporting that style tag. And until that happens, we still have to do the inlining. So, but it's good news, because now a lot of people that are having Gmail accounts are getting responsive emails. And finally, for one of the first times, it's very well documented what Gmail is supporting, and they're kind of moving towards it's not necessarily standard, but at least they're open about, hey, this is what we support. So if you want to see how it kind of works, and specifically what CSS they support. These are all the different CSS attributes. You can scroll through, and this is what they support. So if it's not listed here, then they don't support it. It's not going to work in Gmail. But finally, there's some documentation of what works and what doesn't work. And here's a blog article from Campaign Monitor that talks about this whole update. And it's really been a tremendous boost for responsive email. We were waiting and waiting and waiting for years for Gmail to get on it, and finally, eventually they did. So that's good. But there is a different approach other than doing media queries. There's something called the fluid hybrid approach. And basically the fluid with the hybrid part is, the fluid part means that it's a very much percentage-based layout. That if we're using percentages to flex the layout, but putting on some kind of limits to that. So for example, like a max width, so that if you're going to be 100% up to a certain size, and then it goes to a fixed layout so it doesn't stretch too wide, because a really huge wide email is not going to look good on a desktop. So there's normally an upper limit. So it's like maybe you can go 100% up to 600 pixels. So it's kind of fluid with some limitations, maybe minimum and maximum sizes. That's what is going to create this kind of flexible, fluid, spongy approach. And it actually doesn't require media queries for it to work. And it's still using tables. It's still using CSS. But if you want to kind of read about it, this is talking kind of more about that mobile first approach, because this is a mobile first approach. We're actually going to make it look good on a mobile device, and then let it flex up to bigger screens, and then put a limit on those bigger screens. And because we're doing a mobile first approach, it's going to actually work in all Gmail accounts. So if you want to read actually about, if you are a coder and you want to read about how this all works, this link is actually to a tutorial that talks all about exactly how it works, and they actually give coding examples, and they describe the process. It's a bit complex because you end up kind of coding like a mobile first approach that's flexible with some upper limits of size. But then you have to come back in and you have to fix some issues with Outlook because Outlook doesn't support media queries. And so you have to come back in, and once you kind of start with your mobile and then create your two-column look, you have to fix things in Outlook. So then down below here, after you have created your kind of look, you come back in and you put these Microsoft Office specific tables to kind of fix it for Microsoft Office. And they're conditional. They only work in Outlook. MSO is for Microsoft Office, which is Outlook, right? Because remember I said that it was a Microsoft Word rendering engine, so that's part of Microsoft Office. So it's a bit more complex because you're kind of creating a fluid one for a lot of email clients, but then a fixed one for Outlook. Outlook we're talking about the desktop version of Outlook anyway, so they don't really need a responsive layout. It's okay if they get the desktop layout because they're on a desktop. This one will work in all Gmail accounts. And so if you really want to reach the widest audience with a fluid, flexible, mobile optimized layout, this one, while it's a bit harder to code, it's a bit more involved, is going to be kind of responsive or mobile optimized in a greater number of email clients. We have a question in the chat. Can we just use a responsive template that some of the email marketing providers offer so that it makes sure that it will look good on mobile screens, such as MailChimp? It all depends on the email service provider. I know that a lot of MailChimp templates are quite good. It's always worth testing, though, because, like I said, code things are always changing, and so it depends on the email service provider and the particular template. You want to make sure that you're using a responsive template and test it thoroughly. And if something's not quite working right, then you might need to go in and update some of the code just in case something's changed since they made that template. But if you're not into coding, if you don't know how to do the code, then some of those email service providers are going to be your best bet for doing a responsive email because they do put a lot of effort into those templates. So especially if you need to do something really quick, sometimes your fastest option is just to use one of those templates, fit your content into that template, and then just use what they've already done if you need to bang out something really, really fast. And then when you have something that needs to be more customized and you can spend the time to code it up properly and test it, then you can do your own custom coded email. But nothing wrong with using those templates as long as they work. And the best way to test that is just to actually test it in different email clients. You could test it yourself, but also sometimes they offer testing services like inbox inspections where they can do screenshots and show you in the different email clients. So just always make sure that either you test it or you use a testing service like that will show you that it looks good in the different email clients. That doesn't mean that it's going to look perfect in every single email client or that it's necessarily going to look exactly the same. You just want your email to look good in different email clients. So if you want to learn how to actually code responsive emails, we have a responsive email class. I should mention that this is just focused on responsive emails, and so it's kind of like a level 2 class. If you don't know any HTML or CSS, or if you've never coded up an email before, then you want to first back up and say, well, I want to learn some HTML. So for example, we have an HTML email certificate program, which is a good place to get started if you've never done coding before. And as part of that certificate program, we have an introduction to HTML and CSS, so you can get started knowing how to code HTML and CSS if you don't have any background in it. And then we go to what we just call our HTML email class, and that's a 6-hour introduction class. We'll take a look at that. 6-hour class, and that's your kind of level 1, just learning how to build HTML emails and test them out, send them. We don't do responsive emails in that class. Then the level 2 would be the responsive emails. So first, learn how to do some HTML and CSS, learn how to code some basic emails, and then learn how to code some responsive emails. So if you've already been doing some coding, you've been doing some HTML emails, but you want to learn just the responsive part, you could just go to the responsive HTML email. And if you've done some HTML and CSS, but you've never done any emails, then you could go right into the HTML email. And if you take the certificate, then you get all these as part of the certificate. As far as some additional useful information, Campaign Monitor has this guide to email CSS, and it was great for years and years and years, but then eventually they kind of stopped updating it. And I'm hoping they're going to update it again because it's a really extensive list of tons of support across different email clients. It's really a pretty awesome reference, except it was last updated in 2014. which a lot of things have changed since 2014. For example, the biggest issue is that now in Gmail, they say that you can't do responsive in Gmail. They also say you can't do responsive in Yahoo Mail. Those things have changed. So you can now do responsive in Yahoo. You can do it in Gmail. For example, these two checkboxes that are red X's, they should check on that they do support those, at least in some cases. Maybe not in every case, but at least in some cases. So it's a nice reference for at least some things, but it's getting a bit out of date. If you want to do buttons, like rounded corner buttons, you don't necessarily have to do the background image to do the gradient, but if you want like rounded corner buttons with borders and this rounding, you can put in your URL and stuff. This will actually make, they call it bulletproof buttons because it makes it work in Outlook. To do that, they need to write some VML, which is a vector markup language that Office needs to be able to render this. See, it's got this Microsoft VML right there, and you don't really want to have to code that yourself, so you can use a button generator to do that. And they have a similar thing for doing bulletproof background images as well. So those are some neat tools that you can check out if you're coding the emails yourself. Just some additional resources. MailChimp, Litmus, and Campaign Monitor are all big email service providers that will send out your email, but then they also they know a lot about the email industry because that's what they do. They send emails and they understand the issues around sending emails. Litmus, for example, has a great forum where you can post questions and things, and there's just some great resources for you to learn more at MailChimp and Campaign Monitor. One last plug for that certificate in HTML email. If you want to learn it, you can do it live in person in New York City, but you can also attend it live online. When you're doing the live online, when you're doing a screen share in, you do have to attend our classes when they are being offered because you actually screen share into the live instructor's computer. So all of our times that are posted on our website are Eastern time. And so if you see like a 9 to 4:30 class, that's 9 a.m. to 4:30 Eastern time. So you would have to attend during that time. And you'll be just a virtual attendee instead of a physical attendee. And you'll get an ebook as part of the cost of the course. If you come in person, you get a physical print book. And so you don't have to come to New York City to learn. And if you can't make it for one of the classes, you could always consider buying the workbook, and those are available as ebook or print. So literally, if you want to get started now, you can go on to the website and grab an ebook in one of those things. So, for example, you can go to, let me find for HTML. I'm just going to search for email. So there's the HTML email or the responsive HTML email. So let's say you already know some coding of emails. You just want to dive right into the responsive. $49 for the ebook or $65 for print. And if you want to get a bundle of both, $75. And ebooks come in a printable PDF if you want to print it, but it also comes as an EPUB and a MOBI file. EPUB is loading. You can load that on any e-reader, or the MOBI file you can put onto a Kindle. So MOBI is for the Kindle, and the EPUB is for every other kind of e-reader that's out there. I'm going to open up for some Q&A time in the chat. In case you have any questions that you didn't ask, feel free to start typing those out in the chat for those of you who are attending live. Please subscribe to our channel if you want to get updates on future videos. There's also a thumbs up button down below the video, so if you liked it, please give us a thumb up and subscribe to the channel. We hope to see you in a future live stream, and hopefully you can learn more with us some way. And hope you enjoyed the seminar and got something out of it. Oh, yeah, and just a reminder, this presentation is always available. There's a link to it in the video description right now. For those of you who are attending, I'm going to post it one more time into the chat. And so that link, we just keep it up. You can go to it whenever you want and just check out the link either in the chat or in the video description down below the video. So we have a question in the chat. MailChimp is offering some automatic segmentation groups lately. Do other email providers do that now? Useful since we don't have a ton of info on our subscribers, just name and address. so it's hard to do segmentation. As people get more into doing email, it's not just about like mass sending emails. You can start to get into this kind of because emails are a form of marketing. Marketing automation is becoming a bigger and bigger thing, and so more companies are offering marketing automation, where you can start to kind of build profiles on people, start to learn about them, segment your lists, start to maybe automate your emails that you're sending. And this is a little bit bigger than what your question was to some extent, but it kind of brings up this bigger issue of like, how are you responding to people? What are you saying to different groups of people? And so, for example, when somebody signs up for the very first time, if you have some sort of marketing automation, you could say, well, the first time they sign up, let's send them like a welcoming email that does something. And then maybe like a week later, send them another email, and then maybe 2 weeks later, send them another thing. Or you can set up a series of things for new people so you don't have to manually send those out to just new subscribers. So there's different types of things you can do, and that all depends on the email service provider as far as how much they offer in that. And then there are other companies that offer that marketing automation that might integrate with your email service provider as the people that send it out. As part of that, part of it connects into how you're collecting information on your people. For example, depending on how you're developing your forms, maybe you have a form where you just ask for their email the first time they register for something, but then if they come back and they want to register again, maybe the software remembers, because of a cookie, it remembers their email and just asks them, well, this time put in your name and your first and last name, and you, like each time they come back, they maybe put in a little bit more information in there, so that over time you start to learn more about your people. Maybe next time you ask them for topics that they're interested in, because sometimes the initial contact with somebody, you might not want to ask them too much up front, because you might scare them off by asking for too much of that information. So there's different ways you can go about trying to get more information about your people, but kind of all of that is under the umbrella of marketing automation. So that's definitely, I would suggest looking into that and seeing how either your email service provider currently supports some types of that, or maybe using some sort of third party that integrates with it. All right, so we also have another question. How was that Pizza Hut email background image delivered? It looks like the email was a bunch of different table cells when viewed without images. Let me scroll back. I can hit my home button here to jump back to the beginning. Let me go back. It wasn't a background image, actually. What it was is this $6.99 any, and then the order now. I think what it was is that this was just two images that were carved up. This one and this one. It wasn't actually done as a background image. It was just done as a regular image. So yeah, you're right. I'm sure it was table cells, but it wasn't actually done as a background image. It was just done as probably one image that was like cut up into two pieces. Honestly, I'm not sure why they would have cut it up into two different pieces, actually, because you could have tapped anywhere on this to go order now. It didn't have to be just that this was the thing you tapped on to go there. They had other images in here, so it's not like they needed to worry about the one image policy. So I'm not sure exactly why they would have split it up into two, but yeah. All right, so I'm going to hang out here just after we close this up, and I can text answer some of the questions if you have any additional ones in the chat. But just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Hope you learned a lot. Please subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and hope to see you in a future live stream. Until next time, thanks a lot, and see you later.